We've seen. How's it going? I hope you guys having a great start to your week. Happy President's Day for the Americans. We are going to be talking about family-friendly streaming and whether it's worth it, the pros and the cons, and we're gonna get into it today. So I'm gonna start off by welcoming my lovely co-host. What's up, Hunter? How's it going?
Hello. Okay. I am legitimately super extra excited about today's show. Admittedly, every single one of them is pertinent to the things that we do every day. But I recently moved into the direction of family friendlier, or maybe phrased in another way, less family unfriendly. I think that might be the more appropriate iteration of the phrasing. So the topic of today is that, broadly speaking, which the 18 plus to the family friendly, and this being on a spectrum where we choose to, as viewers, where we choose to reside and what vibes with us the most, and as content creators, how we choose to direct our own orientation toward these sort of designators and the community and audience we want to craft from this. This is something I've been thinking about a heck of a lot lately. So fortunately, we're joined by some people who can share an intense amount of wisdom on this specific subject. Meg Kaylee and BennyFits. Hello and welcome onto the show, my friends.
Welcome back.
Hi.
Welcome back. That's true. Both of y'all's. Both of you's huge.
It's good to be back. I don't know if I'd say intense amount of knowledge, but thanks
Well, we're
for hyping me up.
We'll be the
expecting
judge of
an
that.
intense amount of knowledge now.
I've gained so much knowledge in the last 6 months. It's yeah.
Yeah, with the sort of the nature of the shift itself, there's a lot of wisdom to be garnered from that. So if y'all wouldn't mind introducing yourselves and also talking about why you in particular are on the show, like what it is about the family-friendly 18 plus kind of situation that makes you at least, I would say, a font of wisdom and knowledge, but you can designate it however you want. Meg, if you want to start with yourself.
Sure. So I'm Meg Kaylee. I am a variety streamer. I play a ton of different games, and I also do on-camera hosting. And I have been creating content since I was 12. It started way back in the day with YouTube skits and things like that. And back then, my mom's actually watching right now, so that's kind of funny. But back in the day, I used to never do anything like curse. Like I would never curse or do anything unfamily friendly. And it wasn't necessarily because I didn't want to, but it was because I was 12. So that's kind of still the age where it's really bad to say bad words. You can't do that. No. And I didn't want my mom to see the videos and get mad at me. And then I kept making videos. I started a different channel when I was a teenager, and that was more of a gaming oriented kind of channel, completely separate from everything else, but I still didn't curse. However, I was playing a lot of rated M games that still had a lot of mature content within them. So you could arguably say, maybe my content wouldn't really fall under family friendly because of that. But then after I started streaming, I kind of there's no real filter with that, because with YouTube, you're editing and you're kind of I guess in some way posing things to look a certain type of way, whereas streaming, one of the things I love about it is it's very unfiltered. It's just kind of you there hanging out. And I curse in my day-to-day and stuff like that, so I kind of became unfamily friendly as time went on.
Yeah, Benny, what about you?
So I've kind of always been family friendly. Well, you know what, let me back up and respond the way that you asked to respond. I'm BennyFits. I'm kind of a variety streamer, but I mostly focus on loot-based games, like games where there's a lot of diversity in items that you can collect, and therefore diversity in build craft and ways that you can play. I mostly spend my time in a lot of looter shooters, so Destiny, The Division, Warframe, games like that. And I've always sort of built myself as family friendly as a creator. But the games I play may not necessarily be. I recently kind of pulled back on that and said, okay, well, I'm going to play only family-friendly games, and found that was a much more difficult process than I originally anticipated, and came back to the well, I will always be family-friendly. I just won't work blue. But whatever happens behind me is what happens behind me.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a puppet. Sorry.
Also on a
For
puppet.
those that might be
I buried the
listening
lead, sorry.
and not watching, yes, BennyFits is a puppet. So I guess we should talk about our experiences too, Hunter. So for me, when I started streaming, I've always been mostly family friendly, I guess. I would swear a little bit like here and there. I wouldn't drop F-bombs, but I'd just like some mild swearing. And then after I think I would say like 2 years into streaming, I decided to just like stop swearing at all because I felt it was just kind of like a pointless middle ground where I was like, well, I'm not saying F-bombs, but I'm still swearing, so I feel like there's no point. Like I should either just like swear or not swear, and
Pick
I just
one or the
chose
other.
yeah, like not this weird in between. So I decided to not swear, but I'm the same as Benny with my game selection. And I play anything, pretty much anything I want. So the games aren't always family friendly. So we are actually talking about this on my stream today. I don't cater to children. I just have a stream that can be watched by kids, like if they're in the background or something, like, or I can be put on in a public space. Still dependent on the game, but so yeah, that's
Which is an interesting kind of designation to think about, is where you actually show up.
Yeah. What about you, Hunter?
So before I ever started streaming, I was talking about, because I planned my whole launch out, and I was talking to some family members, and a cousin of mine who has kids had mentioned something about how their kids weren't allowed to watch Twitch specifically as much because one of the kids had been exposed to some language and had started using it, not just on the internet, but on Twitch itself. And that caused me to create an initial designation of 18 plus. This is before they had the whole, selection where you could make it as a what do you call it? Like as a mature channel designator specifically, where you click on the rules and you say, oh, this is for 18 plus only. So I just had it in the rules, like you have to be 18 plus, whatever, in order to try to sort of satisfy this weird situation of not being able to restrict who could watch, but trying to indicate to parents or anybody else where I was. And it was really fascinating, this transition that I had when I first came onto Twitch. I was surprised by the vulgarity, and I myself was not immune. I would curse a lot in my own in my private life, but I was really surprised by how vulgar people were. A few months into streaming, that was 100% me. I was just like all in it, and I have tried to walk that back a little bit, but I wanted to maintain a space where we could have mature, presumably, it's the internet, adult conversations about adult subject matter. But recently, I've kind of wheeled that back in. I still want to have mature conversation, but I've tried to remove as much of the vulgarity as I can and craft a space and a community where that's a little or significantly more restricted than it was before. In terms of the games, I'm not going to really change what that is. But I'm now in the middle ground of not family friendly, but not,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at too.
It's interesting that you say like vulgarity, like specifically vulgarity, which I think is
specifically vulgarity.
I think that's a more powerful word than just like family friendly, not family friendly. When you start to enter into this space where you're talking about what is vulgar, you're starting to talk about like what will some groups of people start to find straight up offensive? Like
there are cultural norms and mores there, yeah.
Right. And there is like this sort of neutral space you can live in, where it's like there are some things that are objectionable, but I wouldn't call it vulgar. One of the things that I did, I'll just go ahead and go into this a little bit. When I said I wanted to go family friendly, completely family friendly, I said what I want to do is find games that are quote unquote Avengers movie family friendly. Because you would likely take your kid to see an Avengers movie. They are going to say some things that you don't want your kid to hear. And remember, they cut a dude's head off.
Yeah.
They cut a dude's head off in the last movie. So, there is a wall there that is like, well, my 8-year-old, I don't necessarily want to see this, but my 10-year-old I might. And the internet is actually a space specifically for 13 years and up in the US. So that was sort of the line I drew, where I said, okay, we are willing to deal with a little bit of this as a people, even if it's against our moral or ethical sensibilities. And that was sort of like the line I drew. I was like, well, this is technically family friendly. I will still be family friendly, but this is technically like you let your kids kind of be involved in this, but it's not like I'm only playing Barney's 1, 2, 3s,
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's an important distinction. There's a difference between being a streamer that is for kids, that targets kids and, caters to children, versus being family friendly, where a kid can be there. Maybe they're not particularly interested in the content, but it's safe for them to be around that type of content. And then at the other end, you have, then it goes into this area where I guess, like, if you compare it to movie ratings, it's like being G is like catering to kids, whereas I feel like PG to up to PG-13 is more still family friendly. And then you get to rated R, which is clearly for mature audiences.
Right. I think that PG and PG-13 is that space where it's like, well, this isn't for kids. This is a space where the parent should get involved. This should be a film that you see as a family. You couldn't just drop your kids off and see this.
That's interesting too, and how I guess thinking about how and probably tied in directly to what it is you're talking about. Are there streams that you would sit your kids in front of and go do something in the background versus streams that you feel it's pretty important to be able to maybe navigate that with them?
That's kind of the reason
where you are going to be there only and kids are not going to be there at all.
That's kind of the reason why I decided to explore that space. Was because I have a lot of people that were like, my 2-year-old sits and watches you.
Yeah.
Like, you realize I'm playing, like I'm shooting a dude that is calling me an a-hole, and you dropping the F-bomb every 5 seconds. Like, you realize that's actually happening. Like, yeah, but they're not here's the thing. The thing that I've learned is that the kids aren't really paying attention too much to that, so much as they're wrapped into what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, what's happening in the background is background. It is content, but it is background. And what you're saying is actually more Bible in that space. You know what I mean?
I remember accidentally teaching one of my viewers' twins a curse word. He was watching while they were taking a bath, and one of them just blurted out literally what I had just said. And I was like, no!
Oh, no.
I felt so worth. They were 3.
Wow.
It's rough. I still hold on to that, and that is part of what has shaped my recent kind of shift. Is I think what Shadow Temple mentioned something about this. A lot of where we started. I started 5-6 years ago. Presumably, fewer children were had by our peer group, right? Like the people who were going to come in and watch, and other content creators and whatnot, and friends. And just by virtue of the nature of time, more of them have children now. And trying to make that consideration that it's not necessarily who it is you're catering to and bringing in afresh, but also people who've stuck with you and what their lives, how their lives have been reshaped in that time. How to sort of navigate your content creation in light of that is interesting.
Or alternatively, how they haven't really changed. I mean, like, if you
attacked.
No, I mean, like, if you've built this audience. So
Yeah,
that was
sure.
actually a problem for me. I feel like I'm dominating this conversation, but
Well, that's
that
why
was
we
actually a
bring you
problem.
on the show, just so
Oh,
you know.
so because I'll dominate a conversation.
so we can learn from
I
you.
feel attacked.
We're interviewing you guys.
So, that's actually a problem that I discovered over the 6-month period where I was completely family friendly. Was that I had this audience of people that watched me play these other games, and now they were like, well, you're not playing those games anymore, so I don't really want to be here. They weren't necessarily bad people, but it was like, oh, well, I came here for this very specific content that you're very knowledgeable about, and that I enjoy watching you engage in. And now you're in this space where I know that as long as this is the rule, you'll never engage that content again. So they take off. Now that I've come back and said, well, look, I realize this is an impossible situation for me to try to manage. And actually a dangerous one to try to manage. Catering, if you say I'm going to be family friendly and I want to be available for your kids under the age of 13, you actually put yourself in a dangerous position as far as COP is concerned. But doing that makes me lose my train of thought. Can't remember what I was saying.
Is there now? See, you've got me thinking. Is there legal distinctions? Like, does calling yourself family friendly put you in that bracket of being like? Is there a difference between kid friendly and family friendly? I know your brand, your business talked about COPPA.
The thing with COPPA is it's the ads that are being shown to the kids. What YouTube says, if you are kids content, there are no ads to protect themselves.
Right. But so if I'm thinking about YouTube, like, I don't mark my content as kid friendly because I play mature games.
But they can do that though. They can actually mark your content as a kid friendly.
I mean,
and then demonetize you. Like,
right. But I guess what I'm wondering is if there's a distinction between calling yourself family friendly versus kid friendly.
I believe that there is. But that's where we talk about the spectrum. You know, like at one end is this is available for everyone. This is E for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in the middle there is T for teen, and then on the other end of the spectrum is AO, adults only. That's if you're in the U.S. If you're somewhere else, you've got PEGI and all the European
PEGI 18.
PEGI 18.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Which is interesting. One of the questions somebody had asked me was, will you stop playing Warframe? And believe it or not, Warframe is rated M, but is actually surprisingly mild in comparison to things that, you might let your kids see. There's no foul language. You might cut a guy in half, but that guy doesn't even look like a guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting kind of divide too, because we've talked a bit about being aware of the fact that kids may see your stream and kind of tailoring it to that. But at the same time, a lot of it in my eyes also falls on parental responsibility. Because if it's not your stream, maybe there's something else that they're going to have on the TV where there's curse words being said or someone being decapitated. So there's kind of this interesting line that I think is important to mention between, okay, I want to tailor my content to a larger audience versus my content is for a mature audience. And if the parent shows it to their kid, that's on the parent for not separating that from them.
Mm-hmm. That was the thing I had to reconcile. I can't make something and hope that parents will show me to their kids. Mm-hmm. That's and in a way that is a Sisyphean effort. I mean, you're just going to be constantly trying to push this boulder, and it's all you pushing it. There's no support for you. People in fact, there are more people waiting to see you fail at it than are willing to support you on it.
I'm curious to push us in a slightly different direction, spurred by some of these comments. What are if I can keep track of it, what are some of the other motivations for sort of audience choice, your preference for how you construct? I remember Loco, you and I talked about this with some other content creators who had made certain transitions, who at a certain time were focusing on a handful of games, or maybe one game in particular. And I think Minecraft is an easy example of this. But there are also much larger games that have a much stronger young person sort of focus and audience, MMOs and stuff that are more in that direction. And if you're going to be streaming exclusively those games, that's a place where you can try and cultivate a very specific audience. And maybe it's just if you want to spend a year doing this to launch your career or to get that boost that comes from this particular game and this particular audience, crafting your content around being, palatable to that group. Meg, what are your thoughts on on the selection and the motivations for some of those choices?
I'm trying to think of how to answer this.
I know. I know.
It was a loaded question.
I feel like Ninja and Fortnite come to mind as like the prime example of someone who changed their content because of the success under that game that they were playing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it really comes down to that at the end of the day, like being aware of what's working for you. So if you are playing a lot of, Fortnite, for example, and you have a Ninja situation where it blows up and now suddenly you have like a much younger audience showing up, then at that point it might make sense to be like, well, whether I chose to or not, now my audience has shifted in a significant way as a result of what I'm playing. So maybe I should also then shift what I'm saying and what I'm doing. And he's an interesting example because, again, it was kind of like he just blew up and suddenly I believe, I'm not familiar with his earlier content, but I believe it used to be more mature, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So he kind of had that happen overnight, and that's definitely a more extreme example. But if something like that happens, it would make sense, I think, to then be a little bit more mindful of the sudden boost of people that you have coming in and what type of audience they are.
Yeah.
It's not like he ever really actively chose like, okay, now I suddenly like I want to cater to younger people now. It just kind of happened. So at that point, if he has younger people watching him, he doesn't want to be like super mature, I imagine.
I actually think that was a mistake on my part as well. Because if you don't know your audience, if you just make assumptions about your audience, and I think that's key to that discussion. You need to know what your audience is.
Yeah.
Where it came from for me for a big reason why I chose to take the direction I did was I would get a lot of people that would say, does anybody know any family-friendly streamers? And people would say, you should go check out BennyFits. And I was like, I would always have to respond to that with, just so you understand, I'm family friendly. The content I'm playing may not be.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I was making that explanation. So I was like, I'm tired of trying to justify this maneuver. And so I was like, well, so I'll just go all family friendly. But it turns out that is it's difficult to find what is family friendly.
It's a niche within a niche, right? Like it's one thing to just like be clean about your language and keep things mostly like the things you talk about mostly palatable for most audiences, and then it's another thing to target your games to be like rated.
You can't control that, and
there's a limited selection. Yeah.
Oftentimes, I find one of the things that I found that made it. I was spending so much time researching games to find out, like, okay, does anybody say anything?
Yeah.
Like I played quite a bit of Remnant Beyond Remnant. What I don't even remember what the subtitle is in that game. Remnant. Mm. I played quite a bit of that before I was like, oh, wait a minute. No, people are actually saying some curse words here. And then I actually played Call of Duty multiplayer online before somebody pointed out that the operator that I was playing was constantly cursing.
I can't even mute voice chat. It's not even voice chat. That's the problem.
That's true too. It was the operator saying it.
Yeah.
And I would find that if I would talk to a developer and say, like, hey, how family friendly? How would you say? And they would say, well, this is our rating. But the rating doesn't actually mean anything in that space. Mm-hmm. The rating, because it could be where we're rated M. Well, why are you rated M? Well, we're online. Okay, well, that doesn't mean anything about the content of your game.
Interesting.
It's surprising how few representatives actually know what how appropriate the content of their game is. Like if it's got like nudity or like copious amounts of gore or something like that, they can immediately tell you, no, this isn't okay for kids. But once you move away from that, they start to like, we've got this rating, and then that's kind of what they have to point to.
Mm-hmm.
So
you mentioned that you were kind of losing some of your audience because you weren't playing mature games anymore. But did you notice that there were new people coming in based on your game selection? Like, do you feel like there is a crowd that's kid friendly?
So I think that there is a crowd that's kid friendly. They're probably not on my time slot because I stream late at night in the US. And actually the people that were coming in, were telling me like they were having to watch their language.
That's
which I'm-
interesting too.
Yeah, so it's like, well, hold on. If this is who's coming in, then what am I doing? What am I actually doing this for? And that was
Right.
when I realized I'd never really analyzed my audience. I'd never really like. It's well and good. Benny is family friendly. That's the character that I've created. But why go through all this additional effort, the additional work, and stuff like that, just to cater to an audience that I don't actually know is there?
Yeah.
And even then, bringing in people that are coming in that are definitely well outside of that audience, it just didn't make any sense. Didn't make any sense.
I mean, so that's interesting too. I mean, how many factors? I hadn't considered that at all. The time slot.
Yeah.
How many factors do actually get put into the equation of like how you construct yours? I mean, who you want to present yourself as, the games that you want to play, the community that you want to create, who gets exposed to those things, the demographics there.
And the other thing is that your time slot may, in your time zone may not be who you're talking to. You might be Dizzy Disaster living, in the US,
right,
and your audience is all Russian.
On the other side of the, yeah.
I mean, like I have a lot of German and British people that come in and watch my show. Like for the little bit of time that they're like, well, it's 2 a.m. here, I'll stick around for an hour. But even then, that's not a kid that's up that late,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting too, kind of what you mentioned about people coming in, like, coming in at that late time, having to watch their language. I've never really, I mean, obviously I moderate my chat, but I've never really filtered out language. Like people are allowed to curse in my chat, but I'm curious to hear about like how much of a challenge that could be, having to manage that and not allow people in your chat to be cursing.
I'm actually thinking about lifting that rule, simply because it's just mods, when they see it, their first reaction is, "Oh, I better cut that language out." But then the person doesn't necessarily know that that's the rule,
Right.
and then then you might be turning away somebody who'd actually be very good for the community, just happens to have a bit of a language problem, and
how do you navigate that when it comes to the content of conversation in chat and not the language, right? Like mature subject matter, but taking it, an adult conversation, but with no use of the curse words and the vile language and whatnot.
I think that's it. That's difficult.
I think it's super difficult.
So in my stream, we ban F-bombs and like, the worst of the worst, but like, mild cursing has always been totally fine. But what I found is that because I don't swear anymore, my audience just doesn't really swear that often. I mean, and if they do, I read it out loud, I just, censor it on my end. But like, yeah, I find that the audience just kind of conforms to how you run the stream. And like I said, if people swear, it's not a problem, but they just
But do you find that to be true with what the topic of conversation is outside of the language that's used?
Yeah, I mean,
like where does
I think
that
generally people can come in and feel a vibe too. They kind of get like, oh, this is what this is about.
But we also know how chat can just go in its own direction, like whenever the hell it wants.
Yeah, I mean, but how often does a conversation get to a point where people need to swear? I mean, usually that if someone is resorting to swearing, it's probably a very heated, charged conversation. I mean, swearing immediately makes a conversation more intense just because of the nature of language.
But I guess what I'm saying is in terms of if you want to have a stream that is for a particular age bracket or welcoming to that, you don't want to be talking about certain subjects usually, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when that shows up in chat, completely devoid of the vulgar language, if vulgar language is never used, but the subject matter is intrinsically mature and adult and outside of what you're usually going for, like how do you navigate that? Like, do you talk about it? Is it something that you try to hit with your mods at a separate time to get them to get into the vibe of like, oh, let's redirect this? Or
my answer might be very unique.
Yeah,
Benny's oblivious, so
I mean,
right, which is an interesting direction.
Yeah, for me, my stream is family friendly, so that would, like, if it's a more adult subject, like it either gets Like if it's too much, like it just gets purged out or something. If
So
someone says something,
it's a mods are on.
it
the
never becomes.
vibe.
Yeah, it's not never like I'm not letting it evolve into a conversation that's like really inappropriate in chat, and then I'm just like, not what am I not gonna talk about it? Like,
Just not comment on it at all.
if I'm not gonna talk about it on stream, then it's one person's comment that gets drowned away anyways, or it's too much for the stream, it gets purged out. I mean, it still falls under the family friendly bracket. It's not just about swearing or not swearing.
So and Meg, this is the thing that I'm interested in your feedback on. Me shifting away recently from the almost anything goes in terms of the language that's used I mean, there are hard lines on what language gets used, but F-bombs or whatever, like that's all fine and dandy. And subject matter, me moving away from that, I still have 11,000 hours of streaming in the totally 18 plus 100% all the time. And community members, like I'm not gonna tell each and every person, hey, keep in mind that we no longer talk about. So there's like the continued assumption that this is the place I go to have these conversations. And you also made, this shift in that direction. How was that because I'm still in it. I'm still very much in it. And I assume that you're like very much past that to some extent, but like in the other direction, how does like navigating that vibe shift feel? And was there any particular approach that you took to it?
So I was kind of lucky in the sense that for me, it was when I went from one platform to another. So basically the YouTube days was kind of when I was very like PG, very censored, no curse words. And then once I started streaming, it wasn't like I was immediately like cursing all over the place and my stream was very mature. But it was just kind of like as my community formed, if people type something in chat with a curse word in it, I would just read it out verbally. So I think kind of like you were saying, the community picks up on that and people kind of are like, okay, this is a more mature stream. Sometimes more mature topics would come up and I would kind of roll with that. But it definitely was a weird transition. Like when I first started like cursing on stream after never doing it in content, it definitely felt weird. But as time goes on, you just kind of find a flow and get used to it. It's got to be more challenging, I think, the other way, because this is kind of a more like the limits are coming down and people are more free to say things they want. But I feel like putting that wall up has to be a little bit more challenging to moderate and navigate and kind of establish within your community. So I can definitely see how that could be a challenge for you for sure.
I think you said something in asking that question too, Hunter, that I think was kind of interesting because it brings up the idea that there's this sort of assumed social contract that I think people who come into a stream who are going to be raucous and break that contract are going to do it almost right away. But people who don't will kind of come in and sort of like, let me see what everybody's talking about. Let me see what how the conversation is kind of going.
Let me get the vibe here before I like read the room.
Right.
That's the water.
Yeah,
and that's actually been my experience. The only time I've ever really had somebody who's just gone way over the line is usually they come in and they're like, oh, so you've got a hand up your butt, right? Like, of course, phrasing it a different way. Like, you seem very good with one hand. I wonder what that's all about. Like, like, oh, come on.
Yeah, I find that the people that cross the line are people that are trying to troll. Like, they're trying to cross the line,
Yeah.
Right.
They want to see how far they can go before you're like, get out of here. You're done. You're done. Come back tomorrow. Try it again.
So how do we do this stuff when it comes to sponsored content and how you present yourself to a potential sponsor and, change or maintain a consistency in the type of language that you use? I know that for me, I would almost universally kind of tone it down. I would just try and tone it down when I was doing sponsored content. But I don't think that I don't know where everybody sits on that. Because it's like, well, no, this is my vibe. If you're going to sponsor me, this is what you get, right?
Yeah, I kind of have the same approach as you, where I will try to significantly tone it down, like no F-bombs. Maybe I'll say like one mild curse word here or there. But I think it is important to recognize that when you are doing sponsored content, you are maintaining some sort of professional relationship. And you just have to imagine, what if they come in the stream right at this moment and the first thing they hear is me like cursing all over the place? Or it's the same way you wouldn't want to be like talking badly all over the place about a game that you're being sponsored to review.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting too when you look at sponsored content on other platforms. Something that I have maintained is occasionally a video I post on Twitter will have some cuss words in it, but for the most part, my Twitter is pretty clean. My Instagram especially is very clean, and so I've worked with companies specifically just on Instagram campaigns, and that's a completely different sort of relationship because they're just looking for that Instagram voice, which is clean. So it's interesting too when you kind of look at it from that perspective of different platforms and such.
Huh.
That is interesting because it's like your stream still has swearing, but then everything else you try to maintain like a slightly cleaner, more refined image.
It's definitely easier when you can type it out and read it back and edit it.
And that's the difference too, right? It's like that sits there. Like if somebody's going to go through my tweets, that word is it's hanging out. It's
That's
just chilling
true.
there.
Yeah.
It's a
And
little
if I'm
more
on stream,
if a
it's
brand is
gone.
looking at you than if it's a curse word within your stream.
Right.
And that isn't to say like let's be sneaky about cursing, but it's just not a brand's first impression of you. If they scroll through your Instagram and it's all clean.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be really shocking for them to jump into your stream and you're like, F this, F that, you're a bunch of a-holes.
Yeah.
You know, like
True.
That's actually, but it's actually been sort of one of the things that when I do my pitch deck, like it's on there, it's like I will always be clean. You know, your whatever it is that you're showing, regardless of how far your thing goes, Benny will always be clean and direct. You know.
Do you think that's really important for both sides of this, or like anywhere that you are on the spectrum, to identify that in the information that you present to a potential sponsor?
I think it says something about how you're going to create content. So I think it sort of defines a little bit about your stream. So when you're doing the whole like, this is what I do and this is how I, like putting that in there, saying like, oh, if you are family friendly, if you are like, I stay clean, I don't work blue, that sort of thing is like, it's a defining part of your channel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you would go about saying I say the F word a lot. Like, I mean, I'm sure there's a joke in there that would.
I put that in my pitch deck.
No, I'm sure that there's like dropping bombs on noobs and dropping F bombs in chat like that. I'm sure that's the sort of thing. Like
to actually like be playful with it. To
exactly. Like I mean, like I think, and that sort of puts it up front with somebody like this is the kind of content you'd expect from here. You know, it's more of an adult crowd that I don't know, likes a lot of Vin Diesel movies. I don't know who likes Vin Diesel movies. Raise your hand. Oh, Hunter, he likes 2 of them.
I will say that, whether you're family friendly or not can affect what type of sponsorships you can do in both good ways and bad ways. So, for example, with games, a lot of game companies really don't mind that much. You'll see game companies sponsor, some of the biggest streamers that are more mature. But there are definitely some companies that do really care. Nintendo is an obvious one. Sony as well. Like they really, really are strict about who they work with. And this also goes outside of the realm of gaming companies as well. Like, bigger names like, I don't know, like Walmart or something. I actually spoke to Tyler from OPG about this to get a little bit of insight because they, work with a lot of companies, both within the gaming industry and outside, to kind of get a perspective of, what kind of offers can people get. And they work with streamers that are family friendly like myself, but also ones that are definitely not. So for bigger companies, it definitely becomes more of a screening process when it comes to what language and the type of content you run on your stream. But there's also things that family friendly streamers can't do or can't be sponsored by, like vape companies, marijuana, gambling, stuff like that, where most streamers that are not family friendly, that's totally fine. Yeah, whatever. But I've gotten offers like that I've turned down because that would be a negative match for me.
Loco and White Claw. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean,
I would say it definitely opens more doors than it closes, but
yeah.
There may be something you're really looking for that if your audience, that's another thing, is understanding who your audience is.
Sure.
Will determine a lot about what kind of sponsors and not just sponsors, but partnerships and things like that you can actually pull down.
I feel like there's something that came up into my head when you were talking about that, Loco, is that like with larger companies, I get the sense that a sponsorship ends up being a bit like an ambassadorship where you end up being whoever it is that they pick ends up being a representative of that company in that moment. Whereas I feel like with your standard issue kind of gaming, it's sponsored content stuff, there's just the general assumption that this is what you're doing for the time being, and it's a bit fleeting, and it's just exposure to the thing, and then you go about your business, and they do too, where it might not be as stringent.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said, especially in this space, there's a lot of a lot of like, oh, we're going to we're going to give you a product and give you a little bit of money, and then you talk about this for like 2 weeks or a month. Whereas with a sponsor, it's like, okay, here's a 2-year-long contract with a plan. This is the clothes you're going to wear. This is how you're going to wear. I mean, like with a sponsorship, it tends to be a little more like, okay, we have the reins with you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it varies so much company to company. Like you kind of touched on that a bit, but even with like long-term sponsorships, there are some companies that would be very quick to close out a sponsorship and cancel your contract if you do even like the slightest thing that they don't agree with. But then some are just like, we don't care. So it's a lot of it's too just navigating that relationship and kind of determining what they're looking for. And I think to kind of piggyback off of what Benny was talking about earlier with like the pitch deck idea, I think it is important to stress to companies that you're working with too that, my stream is a mature stream for a mature audience, but it's not like just a really vulgar, like offensive stream. We still have a positive community and like, a happy space and things like that. So I think that's a good thing to emphasize too.
Yeah,
I did that myself.
I think vulgarity, and excuse me if this is like a little prudish, but I think that there is a connection between vulgarity and toxicity at the same time. Like, if you're
certainly easier to find, yeah,
right. If you come across as a little more vulgar, there's probably a better chance that people in your community are going to be a little more toxic. Not necessarily. I mean, it's not like a binary switch, but it just seems like there's the possibility is there.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. That was the idea behind my decision to not use vulgar language in the first place, was just because of the type of people that it tends to appeal to. But yeah, like, again, not to say that if you swear you're instantly going to have a toxic community, but by not swearing, it's much easier to cultivate a community that is just generally more positive.
Well, I think the thing that really nails it on that one is toxic people are also vulgar people. Vulgar people are not intrinsically toxic people. Like I can be incredibly vulgar and I have no toxicity unless you pull a prank on me. I have no toxicity in my blood at all.
But in the Venn diagram, there's probably more people in the middle.
Yeah, that's right. With that overlap.
It was interesting. You were talking about sponsors, and it brought to mind. You were talking about how a sponsor could easily like shut you off if you were to do something untoward. And I was just thinking about that. Did you ever watch Community?
No.
Show, yeah.
Did you late in one of the later seasons, there was a guy that Subway had hired, and he basically changed his name to Subway, and he was Subway. He represented Subway. So he was on campus, like he ate Subway every day, and he was he starts dating Britta, and they find out he has a relationship with Britta, so they cut him off. So like he loses his entire identity and everything. So he's no longer who he said, who he was like a month earlier, because they had bought his identity entirely.
Yeah.
And the thing is that actually parallels sponsorship pretty closely. I mean, it's extreme, but it is like, it's a good way to get that idea. Like when you're sponsored, no, I'm the face of this brand, and if this face gets a spot on it, the brand gets a spot on it, and there's repercussions for that.
Right.
Yeah, you definitely need to be extra careful if you are family friendly and you're working with brands that value that, as opposed to you run the stream how you are and you're a little bit more vulgar, more mature, whatever, and you work with brands, they know that, so you're less likely to mess up because of that, right? There's like a thin line, I feel like, when you're family friendly.
Yeah, but there's that known quantity. It's like if you signed me and you didn't look at any of my content, whose problem is that? You know, like you're not, well, not in my particular case. Well, I used to. If you watch, 20 minutes of my stream, you know what you're getting into. And if you're going to be, signing a contract, if you want to develop that relationship with me, you should have already done a modicum of research. That's sort of the idea, I guess, that's built in there with the 18 plus kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the one interesting thing I want to talk about with family friendly streaming is a limitation that I find annoying. Working with other streamers and multi-streaming and playing multiplayer games, I really dread. I barely multi-stream just because of the fact that no one I know uses clean language, and I feel bad asking people to try to avoid swearing. I don't want people to change their content for me. And so it makes it this really awkward situation where I want to play games with my friends, but they're not friendly to the stream, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because even for me, and I'm again like more of a mature streamer, I've even had moments where during a multi-stream, the topic will kind of shift to something that is a little too much for me and stuff that I would not normally want to be discussing on my stream. And I can totally relate to that feeling of like, I don't want to like tell people not to talk about certain things or not to do what they want with their content. But when you have that crossover, it's challenging because it's your content too at that point. So it's, I can imagine how challenging that must be.
Yeah, and then you're jumping into that space, and you're not the policeman there. You know, like when you're multi-streaming, you are not the cosmic policeman in this space. So it's difficult to deal with that. I actually very recently had a situation like that, it was fairly mild. It wasn't like, the person was just like, saying the N-word and the F-word and like just, being completely off the rails. But I had basically played a game with a guy the entire night, and then towards the end, he started playing some rap songs with pretty explicit lyrics through Discord, like just chunks of it, like, hey, this is what I think of that. And it was like, all right, that's actually not appropriate for my stream. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna correct the guy. It's the end of the stream, whatever. But at the same time, it kind of like, okay, the next time we do this, I need to have a conversation with you, or we probably just don't need to do this again. Because the thing is, you're hitting me on the back end. It's not something I could catch early on. It's right there at the end of the stream.
Yeah, one thing that I try to do is if I am doing a team stream or playing with other streamers, I will take off like the family friendly tag that I use. I don't know if you guys use tags or even bother with them.
Yeah.
But I'll take off the tag, and I guess I kind of want to have a system where if the tag is there, that's what you'll expect, the usual content. But if it's not there, they're like you may hear things that, you're not used to hearing on the stream. And I'm not sure how effective the tag system is for viewers to recognize that and recognize there's a difference. Maybe there's a better way to do that. But I feel like if I'm going to be playing a multiplayer game and I know there's going to be swearing and stuff, I need to figure out some way to distinguish that, to the viewers that come in expecting something.
I feel like if the tags worked optimally, you would still end up only seeing family friendly on or off. And when it's not there, that doesn't say not family friendly. It just doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
And when family friendly is there, it clearly denotes family.
It's explicit versus implicit.
Yeah, right. And if there were a tag, and if tags worked optimally, and you had this is definitively not family friendly and this is definitively family friendly, and you could like switch between the two, is this something that you'd put in the title, maybe some other indicator that's more likely to show up for people that people would pay attention to?
Yeah, I was thinking title, but I feel like that could be crowded.
Yeah.
And a lot of people kind of don't pay attention to the title either.
Yeah.
Like they don't pay attention to the tags, they don't pay attention to the title. You're kind of at the mercy of informing people yourself or letting the scenario inform people. So
there is the rated mature filter, but
yeah, there's and that's actually probably the best thing that, as in terms of COPPA, that's probably the best thing that Twitch ever did. There was one, because it explicitly says like, hey, don't bring your kids in here. If you're skipping over this, if you're clicking this button, you're saying like, I understand that this was, not for somebody, too young for this.
Yeah.
But the last thing on the topic of voice chat is the trouble is that you're stepping yourself into that scenario, and you can't ask people to change their nature for you.
Mm-hmm.
So like I play with viewers all the time, and I have to catch them. Like they'll say something like, "Hey, look, you know the rule.
Yeah.
I can't stop you from it. You know the rule."
My viewers, if I play with my viewers and they consistently break the rules, I'm kicking them out of voice chat. Like, I mean, at least you can control that, I feel.
Well, mine have been kind enough to like, okay, I'm going to shut off voice chat then.
Yeah.
Like because I respect what you're trying to do, you know, and get you viewers that respect what you're trying to do.
Sure. So what about the two sides of raiding? Family friendly versus unfamily friendly, who you raid into, and how you navigate this isn't an organically, developed community of my own. This is a whole other thing that's coming in, and they're doing it. Navigating both sides of that seems like an interesting bit of a subject to this too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to answer that. I think if I'm raiding into someone who I know is family friendly, I will mention that before the raid, but sometimes it's purely a thing of I don't know if someone's family friendly or not.
Yeah.
So we kind of just take an approach of we raid and we're not coming in with like a curse word, raid message or anything. We just go in, and then I at that point, I kind of put it on the community, and it's their responsibility to read the rule thing that pops up. If it says no cursing or whatever, that's on them to follow those rules. And it is kind of interesting, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, how the community can kind of shift and mold depending on what they're watching and where they are. So I think that kind of solves itself in that way, but it is challenging for me if I'm rated by someone and I have no idea if they're family friendly, because I curse a lot. And so I'll try to like hold off on saying anything for the first 5 minutes, not anything, but anything that's even mildly like a curse or inappropriate, because I don't want, if it is a family friendly stream, I don't want them coming into that. But as time goes on, it's something that'll come up sometimes. Like people will be like, "Oh my God, you said a bad word," and I'm like, "Yep, this is a very mature stream. We curse a lot here. If that's not your cup of tea, a different stream might be better for you." So I'll kind of try to address it if it comes up, but it's challenging because there is no like blunt way of just being like, "Hi, welcome to the stream. Also, this is rated M, so please leave if you don't like that."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it kind of messes up your flow, I guess.
Yeah,
I'm kind of I have the opposite situation where I might be sending people to somebody that's not mature. And when I was under that banner of completely 100% family friendly, within the limits of what I had said, I basically only rated within my own stream team, simply because I knew they were a known quantity.
Right.
And it was like, while I'm doing this, I want to make sure that I'm, I can control that. And now it's more, it's more Wild West when we go on a raid. You never know what you're going to get. But I kind of feel like that's up to, if you're coming on the raid, you're signing on that we're going to this person. I may not even know. You don't know. And when we get there, whatever happens is going to happen. It's your choice to leave if you see something that's objectionable. But it's also your responsibility to do that in a controlled way. Like, you're not going to go in there and go like, "Hey, Benny doesn't curse. Why do you curse?" Like,
yeah,
that's the social contract. We all know that's the way you should behave. And if you don't behave that, maybe you shouldn't even be in my community, man.
Yeah, I obviously have the same situation as you. When I'm rating someone, I try to warn my viewers, and I need to be better about this, but I want to warn my viewers ahead of time, like, hey, they're not family friendly, just a heads up, because I know there are people that watch with kids. And my stream team also is no one else in my stream team is family friendly. So that's always an interesting dynamic during team streams and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure.
But I try to prioritize rating them. And usually by now they know that like if they're getting a raid from me, they should at least take this advice. Try to like not start swearing off the bat, so you like don't like turn everyone away instantly. But yeah, so I do try to warn them, warn my viewers if I'm raiding. If I'm receiving a raid, I will let them know, like, hey, just heads up, our rules are a little bit more strict here. We just be careful with the swearing. It's fine. Like, we're not gonna ban you if you swear. We're just gonna purge it out of the chat. So just a
Mhm.
heads up, try to let people know as they're coming in and be like, yeah, just, the rules are a little bit more strict here. Just if as long as you act cool and respectful, you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Here's a question I have for the other side. So I'm curious because I know for me in the past, like I tend to display usernames on chat or on screen for people who have
Ooh.
subscribed and things like that. If you have somebody who subscribes with an inappropriate username, whether it has a curse word in it or if it's just in some way has an inappropriate reference, how do you kind of navigate that? Do you read out the name still? Do you take it off the screen temporarily? And how do you kind of determine, where that divide is of what's acceptable and what's not?
That's interesting.
Benny,
I'm
do you want to
trying
go first or?
Yeah, I'm trying to fix the problem of displaying it on screen. Like, I'm working on some tools because none of the existing tools are good for that. But absolutely, when I see a name that's inappropriate, I read it wrong. I will read it completely wrong, and it makes sense for Benny to do that.
Mhm.
I like that.
So I mean, like, it's just because I'm not going to give you that kind of power. You already got it on the screen. You were able to do that without any sort of like vetting or anything like that, but you don't control what I say. So
Yeah, so for me, if the name is really bad, we don't even actually allow it in chat. So what we'll do is one of the mods will whisper that person, be like, hey, just to let you know, your name's a little bit too inappropriate for the channel. We're gonna, ban you, but feel free to come back with a name that's more appropriate. Or if you want to change your name, and that happens, like people will change their username, be like, oh, I didn't even realize that. So
That's interesting.
yeah, so we usually don't even let it get to the point of them subbing. We've had a few usernames that have kind of been not the most family friendly names that have like been regulars, and it's just kind of been on the border, and I just won't read the part that's inappropriate. But yeah, for the most part, if it's not suitable for the stream, we'll just like talk to them in whispers and let them know, and see if they want to change it, go ahead, or they don't come back. I guess.
yeah, I'm trying to automate that particular process of like always checking, having a bot that checks the viewer list and always going through it and saying, okay, these are names that we should censor if an alert happens.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so that's stored into a table that whenever an alert comes up, check the table. Does this match? Okay, then we'll filter it out some way.
Mm-hmm.
Name them anonymous or something, which is great because that means that Benny gets to thank the hacker group Anonymous. That's what he does. If ever something comes up anonymous, it's like, wow, anonymous with a $20 tip. I'm glad to know that I've got them on my side.
Yeah, so with tipping programs, I think there are ways to censor bad words. I know Streamlabs and Stream Elements both have ways to automatically censor bad words like that. So that's super handy. There's obviously going to be people that get around it. But it's not that frequent. Especially like my tip minimum is $3, and that seems to be a big deterrent towards trolls. Like they want to spend $1 to troll. They won't spend $3.
Yeah.
It's like the infamous Nick G that gets through all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a massive custom list of banned words in both my chat and for my tips. I mean, it's massive.
Somebody in chat just said I'd never use text to speech, and that's actually what I was going to say. Is like that's another thing is I never turn that on, and I'm surprised at the number of people. Loco has it on. I'm surprised you have it on.
Yeah,
you are empowering some troll to come in there and have you.
I think Loco just looked at her stream deck.
What do you mean?
Oh, you didn't?
No, I'm reading chat right now.
I have a skip alert button on my stream deck that's up at all times for exactly that reason. That's why I thought you were looking at and you were like in a reference.
That's a really smart idea. I actually do have a way to disable alerts or disable sounds from the stream deck. So that's a really great idea. I don't get a lot of text-to-speech trolls. And again, it's that $3 thing. It's 300 bits or $3. And it really is a big difference towards people being inappropriate or not.
Yeah, I just choose not to have it on simply because, like if I want to see the message, when I see the message, I'll read it. And if you've decided it's inappropriate, guess what, dude? You're just out a bunch of money. You're just out whatever money that you spent. And I think I have like a $10 limit on whether or not it pops up in an alert. I'll have to check that, but I'm pretty sure that's where it was set. The worst trolls are typically very poor.
Well, they're usually kids. They don't have any money, so.
Right.
Yeah.
It's an easy screening process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is there anything else we haven't talked about that we want to cover?
I actually do want to say something about Kappa, because that was a big part of my choosing to go back to my usual content.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think, like, Kappa's been around forever. Kappa has been around for about 20 years. And the general rule of Kappa is you cannot knowingly collect the private information, identifying information of somebody who is under the age of 13. That is the rule on the internet as far as the United States is concerned. And the recent ruling changed that to say, well, we also have to look at all this content. There's like this dearth of content on YouTube that seems like it's for kids, but is not for kids. How do we protect our children from that? And that's the sort of thing that like made me start thinking, okay, well, I need to try to protect myself from that. I had already made the choice to go family friendly. So when I saw that, I was like, wait a minute, you can actually get yourself into a lot of trouble by making content that people perceive as for kids.
Yeah.
And Twitch is not a place for kids. It is simply not a place for anybody that's under the age of 13. If your parents choose to do that, your parent is your guardian. Your parent is the one making this choice for you. But the platform itself was not designed for you. You know, it's not designed for you to have an account. So I can't control the ad content. And therefore, that was kind of the point where I was like, okay, I have only control over so much stuff. And I don't even really have I don't even have that kind of control, the kind of control that I think I do. So if this puts me in danger, I need to step away from that danger.
You know, this, yeah. What about how these things apply then to, and how we apply them to Discord? Because when it's a live stream, you know, the mods are, you know, super active the whole time. You get to sort of navigate that yourself live and in the moment. But in Discord, you know, there may be times when, you know, there's no mod who's actively looking at it, and something can linger there for a long. Is there any variation to how other, because Meg, you talked about other platforms. Is there any variation to how we treat and consider things on Discord? Are there, you know, making sure that there are rule sets in there, and you just have to like accept that things will slip through?
Yeah, I think for me, for the longest time, I had my Discord sub only entirely. And that's kind of a good way to filter out, because kind of like what Loco was saying, a lot of trolls who want to troll, they're not going to spend $5 to get in your Discord.
Yeah.
But then I eventually changed it where almost all of the channels are sub only except for like the general chat channel. So that makes it a little bit easier to manage. And it is tough because you're right, it's a 24/7 platform. There could be times where maybe people aren't looking as much, but I think it really comes down to keeping an eye on it yourself and peeking in frequently. Maybe having some sort of bot that can moderate out certain words and certain language for you when you're not there. And then there are other things I have too, like people who are not subbed can't post photos and stuff like that, just to prevent like certain types of trolls and things like that. And yeah, I think those would probably be those are the main things that I do. And then just having a really good mod team that checks in. And of course, you don't want to be like, you have to be on 24/7 looking at this, but just if they happen to see it, and I'll try to hop in when I can here and there throughout the day too.
That's interesting, because like that's actually the Blizzard rename your character in World of Warcraft approach to preventing trolling. They made that so it was a paid service simply because if you're kind of a jerk in the game, it's going to cost you money to get rid of that reputation. You know, so like that's sort of the same thing. If you really want to be a jerk in my Discord, and you say, well, you've got to be a sub to be able to post something, well. Like it's the same way with my Twitch chat. If you want to post a link, without being any sort of moderation, you've got to be a sub.
Yep.
So you're gonna have to buy in for that, for your chance to be a scuzzy troll. And you know what? In the end, I'm gonna delete your link, but I'm still gonna have your money. So.
Yeah, and so for Discord is an extension of the community. It is a community hub. So the rules play just as equal there. You have to follow the rules. It's rules of channel, it's rules of the community. Yeah, I mean, we have so Discord has like verification levels. So Like you can make it so like people have to have like a registered account on Discord, or they have to be in the server for X amount of time. So those are things that make it really annoying for someone that just wants to like make an account to just troll. Really, really annoying to do. I don't even think I've ever had trolls in Discord because it's so much extra effort to go and do that. And we have so many mods in the Discord server that it's a pointless effort. And like what Meg said, there's a lot of ways that you can moderate your Discord automatically. Not allowing non-subs to post pictures is a big one. I think links maybe as well.
Pictures and links.
Not sure. Yeah. So
think so.
there are ways to kind of make it really, really annoying for someone to waste time trolling.
I just had an apostrophe. I'm sorry, that's a hook reference and nobody got it. So I'm moving on. I actually just realized. Yeah, I believe you mean epiphany, sir. Yes, lightning has just struck my brain. Yeah, there you go. There's the whole scene. But I just realized that, actually recently Discord has announced public servers. So you can actually get yourself listed in a public directory. So you take your server from being a private server to a public server, and you get listed in this directory that is supposed to make you discoverable by people who may not be within your community. And actually, it's a tenet of that once you do that, you are now going to become policemen for your Discord. Your Discord has to remain a certain level of appropriateness. And Discord is not entirely clear on what that means, but you basically have to up your moderating game if you want to do that. So it's not just a conversation that we're having about like how do you protect your Discord. It's also something you may want to think if you want to get some additional discoverability and try to drive people to you into your community, and then from your community to your content, the opposite direction. The bottom up approach as opposed to the top down.
I would definitely rather have nobody in my Discord server than have to police a public Discord server.
Well, another thing to think about is if you're a Discord partner, you do have to do some level of policing, and you can't have not safe for work channels. So if you decide to go that route, then you actually already have to do that type of moderation.
But at least the funnel's a little tighter at the top, right? As opposed to just being this like big open. So it's
if you're going
easier to navigate.
If you're going top down from your content to all these other things, then the filter is already there. You are the filter.
Right.
The other way, you're trying to filter a bunch of tiny little things and try to keep them all managed.
Oof.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so in short, I feel like if we were to summarize family-friendly versus not, family-friendly streaming definitely has broader appeal, both in terms of audience and in terms of potential brands and sponsorships. But there are also limitations to being family-friendly in terms of what type of content you can produce, who you can work with, who you can have on your stream, etc. So there's pros and cons to both. I don't think being non-family friendly is like noticeably detrimental to a channel, just as family friendly doesn't inherently have an upper hand. Like you're not going to be more successful at streaming one way or another. But yeah, if you guys have any closing thoughts, like I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I agree on that. And I think that's something that's good to keep in mind too, is we didn't really touch on it a whole lot, but just allowing your personality to be at the forefront. So for me, a lot of it was really just in my day-to-day, if I'm hanging out with friends, I kind of have a similar approach to that as I do to streaming, because it's a similar type of social situation for me. And I don't want it, for me, I just didn't want to feel like I was being a filtered version of myself on stream. And so that was a big part of it for me, of why I just was kind of like, you know what, I'm going to curse. And if someone doesn't like that, then it's not a channel for them. So it's definitely a line, I think, to kind of navigate between like just being yourself, but also being brand friendly and things like that. So
yeah. No, that's such a good point. Like you should do what you're comfortable with. Do what makes you shine on stream. Don't limit yourself because you're trying to get sponsorships and all of a sudden you're a stick, aka me.
Well, and again, like bringing it back to knowing what your audience is, I think has a lot to do with it. I started out, and I haven't really brought this up because I've kind of sort of treated it as like an understood within my community that people there's a lot of this assumption of knowledge, like everybody has the same level of knowledge that you do, and that just comes with gaining knowledge. The more knowledge you gain, the more you think is just sort of inherent.
Yeah.
And that being sort of like what the foundation of my audience was, it just made sense for me to always stay this way, always stay in a way that is more approachable and more available to people. So if you're building your audience that way, if you're building an audience, be aware of that. Just be aware of who is in there, what the purpose is, and stick to that purpose.
Yeah, I think I'm personally so far pretty much enjoying the middle ground area. The Loco, for you, I understand where you were coming from with the I gotta pick one or the other with this. I like having the presumably mature and adult conversations and it's difficult to navigate because of what ends up showing up in chat, because it's not a clear boundary, moving away from the vulgarity iteration of adult and mature where anything goes. And I think it's proving to be kind of difficult to navigate. And again, because I'm sort of importing an entire community that's used to the vulgarity that I used to express, and as that was the whole kind of vibe of the stream, we're getting used to it. But I think I like that flexibility to it. We can still bring up adult conversations. We just limit how wild it flaps in the wind.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's definitely fair. Okay, so if we want to do some shout outs to close out the show, Meg, Benny, thank you guys as always for joining us. You guys have been fantastic, and I appreciate the diverse perspectives you guys bring.
Really good.
Tell us where we can find you and what you're up to.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Firstly, you can find me at twitch.tv/Meg Kaylee, and on all other social media, it's Meg_Kaylee, because there's another Meg Kaylee who has it without the underscore.
Dang it.
But yeah, I've been playing a lot of The Witcher 3 recently, which kind of falls under the topic. Very not family-friendly game, but a very good game. So
Yes.
if that interests you, feel free to come by.
And I'm BennyFits. I have been informed by the guys in the tech protection program not to let you know what my location is, but you can find me on Twitter at BennyFits TV and on Twitch at BennyFits. I couldn't get BennyFits because for the same reason, some guy who apparently is now sorry that he has the name BennyFits because he has closed down his account.
Oh no.
Oh my gosh.
So
That's unfortunate.
the account still exists, but nobody gets into it. Nobody gets out. I am currently playing The Division 2. I'm back to The Division 2. It's been a staple of my stream for a very long time to play that franchise. It's something that I love very much. And the new expansion is coming, so
Yeah.
I am trying to get as many people geared and ready to go as possible
To join in. Nice.
Yeah. So if that's your fare, if you just want to drop that $3 that it costs right now to get into it, it's a good place to go. I'm actually, I would dare say I'm probably one of the maybe 5 streams that don't have a little bit of toxicity in them in terms of the division.
All right.
Hunter, what about you? What's up, Tim?
I am the Hunter Wild. You can find me here every Monday, next to my incredible co-host and co-owner Loco. I stream over at twitch.tv/The Hunter Wild, where it's kind of middle of the road in terms of the content we were talking about today. Do a full scale, full spectrum of games, from new releases to older stuff and indie titles, but not retro. I'm kind of allergic to retro, but you can find me over there at 11 a.m. Pacific, Monday through Thursday. On Twitter at The Hunter Wild TV. Kind of a similar story to literally everybody else here. And always an honor and a pleasure to be on this show with incredible people. Thank you both for being guests with us. And of course with the brilliant and incredibly adamant, wonderful, hilarious Loco.
One adjective per show, Hunter.
Loco, what about you? That was one really long one. It's like it's in German. You just string them all together. And it's one
right,
word.
right. Yeah, so you can find me at twitch.tv/LOWCO. I am a just chatting / variety gamer hybrid streamer is what I'm going with these days. I do a lot of just chatting. We watch movie trailers, game trailers. We'll talk about gaming news. We'll talk about
That's so
streaming
good.
as well. We talk about like more controversial subjects sometimes involving streaming. And then we play video games. I play pretty much everything. I think this week I'm checking out Wolcen, the new ARPG, and I think I'm gonna check out Stone Shard, I believe it's called. It looks really interesting. Hunter, you should actually check it out. I feel like you might like it. Stone Shard, it's out on early access. It looks very beautiful, and I want to play it. So yeah, I play pretty much everything. But yeah, you can find me there and on Twitter and everywhere, and here on StreamerSquare. If you guys enjoy this content, you should follow the channel because we do shows every single week. 3 days a week. We have 5 different shows for you guys every single week. So if you guys like educational streaming content, you should follow this channel. Check us out everywhere, StreamerSquare, Twitter, YouTube, and Discord. Come hang out with us if you want to learn about streaming and lots of streaming. Streaming and content creation.
And moderation now.
And moderation.
It's like it's a full, yeah.
This is true. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate it. We'll see you guys next week. Yes, next week.
Yes.
Okay, we're missing 1 week because of PAX East, but it's not next week. It's the week after that. Anyways, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Adios.